Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Extra Lap podcast. Today, we are lucky enough to have with us former Olympian Jessica O'Connell. Jessica, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. So, Jessica,
Good.
it's not every single day that we have a former Olympian on or an Olympian on like yourself. So, I feel like today we have the unique opportunity to learn a little bit about the Olympic experience. So, what was that like, your experience with the Olympics?
Oh man, I mean that's a big question. It was very fun. It was very cool. Obviously something that I'd worked for a very long time, and I felt very lucky to have the Olympic experience because a lot of athletes train just as hard as I do and had given up a lot as well and sacrificed a lot. And I saw my teammates and my friends and my training partners end up not making the games because they were fourth at the trials, or they got hurt the week before, or they got sick, or all these little circumstantial things.
Mhm.
So, first of all, like the big feeling I had there was gratitude. I was so lucky. I felt so lucky that I was in the right shape and I was in the right fitness in the right place at the right time, because there's a lot that can go sideways.
Mhm.
And I think the other really cool thing was that, I mean, I ran track professionally for about 7 years. So I'd run in world championships and Pan Am Games and Commonwealth Games and all of that stuff. And my friends, my close friends and my family followed my career and stuff like that. But the Olympics was just so much bigger. Like everybody knew about it. I got messages from like people I went to elementary school with and hadn't seen since, and like old teachers and stuff wishing me good luck. And that was very, very cool. It felt a lot more like a community thing. Like it felt more like I was running for more than just like in like those in my corner. It just felt so much bigger. So that I'd say that was the coolest part.
Definitely. And like, I mean, if you ask anyone outside of the running sport, if you ask about the world championships, some may know it, but if you ask anyone what the Olympics are, almost everyone will know it. It's just such a big deal and such a big thing to be part of. And how
Mhm.
do you like just put that aside in the weeks building up to it and not let that moment become too big?
Um, good question. I mean, it was really big. Like it was super stressful knowing like, oh yeah, there's this huge thing that I'm doing and I really hope that it goes well. So that was tough for sure. It was like it's a pressure that I've never felt before, where it's like, okay, well, like this huge thing's going to happen and everybody knows about it. And it's really important and you might never get another chance. So like that was absolutely in my head in the weeks leading up, but I really tried to block things into just trying to figure out what I could do that day.
Mhm.
So I was actually hurt leading into the trials and I was really stressed that I wouldn't be able to qualify. And another athlete actually gave me some advice. She was a speed skater and she was working out in the same gym that I was. And she said when she was trying to make the Winter Olympics, she was also pretty stressed and she was told to just really focus on what she could do today. Her actual motto was like today, not tomorrow, which sounds kind of corny, but like what can she do today? Tomorrow doesn't matter if you do your best today. And
Mhm.
then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day, you'll be as ready as you're going to be. So I really held on to that. Like, what can I do today to get myself ready? And then rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. But it broke it down into kind of like bite-sized chunks instead of just like, oh my gosh, this whole process is overwhelming. Instead, it was like, yeah, I can be a good athlete today. Okay. And repeat.
And yeah, and not a lot of people get to see like the Olympic Village up close. So what was that like?
It was fun. Think of it as like a big summer camp. So it's very hectic. There's people everywhere. It's really fun though, because you get to stay with your teammates. So I think in my room there were, I don't know, 6 or 7 different athletes. And then we kind of had a common area and then we each had our own. Well, I think I had a roommate in like these little like double rooms.
Hmm.
And I got to stay with my training partner, one of my best friends, Maria Bernard. She steepled at the games, but then we also had like a hurdler and a heptathlete and a sprinter, and maybe a jumper in our room. So a big variety of different athletes who were staying with us. And then broader, there were just athletes from all of the different track events, but also all the different sports. So you kind of group into your countries. I spent a lot of time hanging out with the Canadians and supporting other Canadians as they were doing their sports and their events. And yeah, that's just basically you hang out with your friends, get nervous for your event, and watch sports. That's basically what it's like.
And is it a weird feeling, like, just seeing the people around you and knowing these are some of the top athletes? I mean, even outside of your sport, like the basketball players or even the swimmers or anyone just saying, "Wow, these are the top athletes in the world."
A little bit, but you get kind of like that gets normalized because everybody there is the top athlete in the world or amongst it, right?
Mhm.
But it's just kind of a lot of mutual respect. Like how I felt was I'd look around and I'd be like, cool, it was really hard for me to get here. I bet it was really hard for you to get here too. So like, good job. I get you. Maybe that's a gross generalization, um but yeah, no, it was kind of cool to see like the biggest athletes. Like Simone Biles was in the cafeteria one time. So when you see the celebrity athletes, then it's like, okay, that's kind of cool.
And was there any moment that stuck out to you, like just the experience wise? Was there a favorite moment or
Mm.
just anything?
Mm.
Yeah.
I can think of a couple. Before we started, we did a training camp in Juiz de Fora, which is a town a couple hours outside of Rio. And the night of the opening ceremonies, we weren't at the opening ceremonies, but we all put on our uniforms. We watched them on TV, and then we took a big group picture. And it was just so exciting because we knew that this big thing was about to happen, but we weren't quite there yet. So it was kind of like Christmas Eve. That was cool. And another event, a big thing that stuck out for me was my sister actually had a surprise party for me before I left. And that was very, very cool because it felt like just a big community celebration.
Mhm. Definitely. And I mean, I've had the opportunity to interview a few Olympians, and each one has had a little bit of a different answer to this. So I'm curious what you say. What was more nerve-wracking, the Olympic trials or the Olympics itself?
Mm, it's a little different in Canada because the trials aren't as intense as the US. So I was very lucky that in the 5K, I still needed to come top three, but there were only three of us with standard, I believe. So it was a little bit, it's less intense than in the US where there's like 20 people with standard and you're just fighting to the line.
Mhm.
So I would say that actually competing was more nerve-wracking, but um like I said, I was hurt leading up, and so that was kind of scary too. So that this is an answer that's all over the place. I would say competing at the actual games was more nerve-wracking.
And in your career, how would you say you put yourself in the position to win a race?
Mm, within the race or like high level?
Like in any race, how would you say, like, at what point in the race would you say you moved up, or what, like, how would you put yourself in a position to go for the win?
I think it's important to do a bit of groundwork and know who you're racing, not necessarily overanalyzing their PPs or anything like that, because anything can happen in a race. But you should have a general idea of what you think could happen and where to put yourself. So in a race where like a diamond league where I know I'm not going to win, I'm going to race very differently than a race where I have think that I have a good shot. So I think the most important thing to do is know who you're racing, know the general field, but then also always cover moves. So as long as you can, keep your eyes up, know what's happening around you in the race. Don't just go into autopilot. Don't turn your brain off. Eyes up, watching what's happening so that you can cover anything that happens to keep yourself in there.
And in your career, at least looking at your stats, you went from a lot of 1500s in earlier in your career to moving towards more 5Ks. So what was that transition like?
Yeah. I don't know if it's in the same in the US, but in Canada, it's pretty common to race the 800 and the 1500 in high school, maybe the 1500 and the 3K, but we don't offer 5Ks in high school or anything like that. So I started as a pure middle distance runner, and then through college, I went to university in the US,
Mhm.
and I was exposed to the 5K because I realized that my kick isn't as quick as everybody else's.
Mhm. Yeah,
Oh,
and
sorry, you still there?
yep, and
Okay, sorry, it froze on my end.
all good, no worries. Yeah, and in college, if I'm not wrong, you went to West Virginia, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And you were an All-American in cross country. So what was that like?
Not in cross country, only in the 3K and the DMR.
Oh, fun. But well, then what was that like? My apologies.
It was fun. It was a much higher depth of competition than Canada had at the time, which was very, very cool to get to run in. I think it really helped me to learn a lot that I maybe wouldn't have had I stayed in Canada in terms of like just what was out there depth wise, like seeing what I could do versus these other girls and stuff like that. I was blown away by the work ethic of the girls in the NCAA, which is very, very cool.
Mhm.
But yeah, to answer your question why I moved up to the 5K, basically I kept getting out kicked in 1500s and I realized I had a problem, so I had to move up.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing. At least in the US, I feel like I mean it's a little different. I'm a senior in high school, so we're all going, oh, mile 1500 versus, everyone doing a 5K. But like, I don't know. It's just weird, but for us, but it's less common for us to do the 5K at least. But
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot more opportunity later. And honestly, like the 5K takes quite a bit of mental focus, and I would not have been mature enough to do that when I was in high school. Like it's taken years of racing to be able to get my head into a race that's as long as the 5K.
yeah, and how would you suggest like just staying focused during a race?
I think there are a couple different ways. Mantras often work well for me, or singing a song in my head. Just one line of a song over and over and over. That sounds like being distracted, not being focused, but it's a way to kind of click into flow without overthinking things or being in total la la land. Splits can be really helpful, knowing generally where you want to be and where you are, how you're running. And then I think the biggest one is just working off the athletes around you. So
Mhm.
focusing on the back of the person in front of you or what's happening in front of you. Should you make a move? Are you just hanging on? Like all those things are great distractions, and that's racing, right?
Mhm. Was there any particular song that you listened to, or not listened to, but like sung to yourself? Can you remember?
Not really. Normally it'd be whatever was playing during warm up. I wouldn't pick one. It would just pop into my head.
Mhm.
So if something on my playlist during warm up just like was extra catchy, or sometimes they play music during races and that just I just get like the chorus of a song stuck in my head and I just repeat it over and over and over.
So if you're like you're in the 5K and you're at mile one, and all of a sudden does the song just pop in your head, and you're like, "This
Yeah, it's weird.
song right here." Yeah. Is there any genre of music that you like to listen to in particular, or?
In regular life, I'm kind of like alt rock, alt folk, but for racing and training and exercising, more like pop or top 40, like catchy stuff.
What would you say is your go-to song in warm-ups to pump you up?
I'd say some Destiny's Child or some Beyonce.
There you go. Definitely.
Yeah.
And as you transitioned more to the 5K in your career, how did you build up base, or like what workouts did you do to get to like an endurance level to do races like that?
Well, the program I was in the NCAA was quite a bit more endurance focused than what I was doing in high school and back in Canada.
Mhm.
So that happened naturally just through like greater mileage in workouts. So my workouts got longer, my off days got longer. We really approached it more from the aerobic side. And I was able to kind of carry that sort of training back when I moved home to Canada after I graduated. So it happened over many years, like gradually increasing my base, gradually adding in doubles, gradually adding in. Sometimes I would cross train as doubles rather than running,
Mhm.
lengthening out my workouts, but just slowly over the years, they just got longer and longer.
And I've been looking into cross training a lot myself recently. Well, how would you suggest someone would go about getting into cross training
Mhm.
as an
Well,
alternative?
it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. If it's just to like supplement some easy miles, I think something like the elliptical or incline walking on a treadmill, water running, all of those are really good because they're not going to beat your legs up. So
Mhm.
it's just a way to get a bit more aerobic work in. So you can use it to supplement a run, you could use it as a different session, you could use it in lieu of a run if you're feeling pretty beat up.
Mhm. What about like biking, like a stationary bike? Would that work? Would you say?
It could. The bike's not my favorite because it makes my legs really tired. So I always found that my legs got tired before my heart and my lungs did.
Mhm.
So I felt like I would get a better workout. Well, I felt like the elliptical or something like that felt more natural to me, but lots of people are really good on the bike and they don't have that problem.
Yeah, definitely. And when you came over to the NCAA from like when you came to the States, was there any difference at all in the style of racing between the Canadians and the Americans, would you say?
Um, I'd say the biggest difference is just that the races are quite a bit deeper. So more people in them, more people who are clustered around like a certain PB, like the field is much closer, whereas in Canada it's a bit more spread out.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like when you're in a race where people surrounding you all have the similar like PB as you, what would you suggest? Just like move wise, like it's so easy to get stuck and get like, all of your energy drained trying to get in the right position. So how would you suggest not being stuck in there?
Well, when you're racing people with similar PBs to you, you can kind of trust that if you're running with them, you're probably running pretty quick, right? If they are as well, unless there's something funny happening in the race. So I'd say to try and relax as much as you can and
Mhm.
then just cover moves. So making sure like once again your eyes are up, you're watching what's happening. Um, but you don't need to be in the perfect position in lap one, unless you're running a 400, of course. But what you need to do is be able to get yourself in the perfect position at any time. But that doesn't mean you need to be there until the opportunity arises or space opens or you're feeling pretty good and it's time to go. So you kind of have to like pick your line with the least amount of energy expended.
Yeah, and all right, this question just popped up in my head, so I just have to ask. As someone who did the 5K, 3K, even 1500, what's the shortest race you've ever done?
Oh, I don't know. In high school, probably a 400, but
Mhm,
800 would be the shortest I run like regularly, I guess.
mhm. Yeah, and outside of running, what would you say you do for fun?
Well, now I'm coaching. So I coach a university team in Canada, which is really fun.
Mhm,
And I also work as an online coach. So I coach people all over the world, doing mostly road races, stuff like that, trail races, adults. So that's fun. But for fun, I like to hike. I like to go to concerts. I live close to the Rocky Mountains, so I've taken up cross country skiing.
mhm.
Just basically being outside and moving my body.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you coach for a university. So what would you say is like a basic plan you would say you give to your runners, if you can say that?
Oh man, they're so different. Well, since I was coaching online with different people before I started coaching the university, so I really approach it from like an individual of a program as I can because that's what I do online. Everyone's an individual.
Mhm,
So some athletes are running like the mileage that I give my athletes varies wildly between based on how old they are, what they're training for, and where their strengths are.
mhm.
So that's a big variation. And then workout wise, we do hard workouts 2 or 3 times a week and pretty standard bread and butter. There are no secrets really.
And what advice would you give to someone who's just getting into running?
I'd say if you're like just getting in, it gets easier. Every time I take a break or when I was coming off injury, I'd always be like, "Oh, I understand why people don't like this. It's really hard." But there is a hump. You do get over it, and then running becomes effortless, which is the best feeling in the world.
Definitely.
Um, if you're just getting into competitive running, know that there's so much to learn. Every single race, every single practice, you're going to learn something different about tactics or how to be tough or how to pace or how to get something out of yourself. Running's just like a very simple activity, but it's also a very complicated activity to really nail. So you're always going to be learning.
Yeah, and you ran at a lot of big races, the Olympics, Diamond League, and one that stuck out, it just happened recently, but Milrose. What was your experience at Milrose like?
Yeah, I loved the Millrose Games. I raced there 2 or 3 times, and it was one of my favorite meets because the crowd is really, really good. And honestly, because I used to watch it on TV when I was a kid, so the idea of racing in a race that I watched as a kid on TV was so cool. And they treat you really well as an athlete. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I set the Canadian indoor record in the 3K there. It's been broken now, but that was a very cool experience. And so it just really cemented Millrose Games as one of my favorite races in my heart.
What was the feeling like breaking a national record? How that must just feel pure joy and satisfaction.
Yeah, it was very satisfying. It was very cool. I couldn't stop looking at the clock to make sure that I was seeing it properly.
And like, was there nerves? Did you know on that day that was what you were going for, or?
Mm, I I knew that it was in the realm of possibilities, and I knew kind of like when you asked, what is it like to run with people with good PBs? Sorry, PB similar to you. I wasn't the fastest PB in the field, but I believed that I could run with anyone in the field. So rather than looking at splits or anything, I knew that if I was just racing well, I would run fast. So I just kind of like left it to fate, stuck my nose in there, made sure that I was racing and competing well with the leaders, and then I knew then the time would be what it was going to be, and it was quick.
Yeah. And once again, this is more of an outside of running question, but do you have any pets?
I don't, no pets.
Pets? Really?
No.
That's surprising, I gotta say.
Why?
I don't know. I feel like a lot of at least a lot of runners. I don't know why this is just an unnoticed thing. Everyone has a dog for some reason. I've always noticed that. But I mean, you know what? Everyone has their like little thing, and yeah.
Yeah, I wish I would love to have a dog, but I travel a lot and yeah, it's just not in the cards right now.
Yeah, I have a little pet bearded dragon, so I'm in my own I'm in my own little world with pets. I don't even know what's but and
Cool.
the last question I have for you is how do you deal with unwanted results?
I think it's important to know that they're part of the game. They're gonna happen. They happen to everyone.
Mhm,
And it's worth reflecting on what went sideways, whether it was how you raced, or if you overestimated your fitness, or if there was some other obvious mistake, like you were sick or I don't know, ate the wrong thing, who knows? But see if there's a reason why a result would be poor, but also really consider if it actually is poor. A lot of the time, like gut reaction to a result that you're not expecting is like, oh my gosh, I suck. But then if you think about it, it's like, oh, but also you had 30 midterms this week, so you're tired. Or, oh, also you actually raced really well and you were gutsy. You put yourself in a good position, it just didn't work out.
mhm.
So I'd say like see if there's an obvious reason why it went poorly. And then I would analyze like, was it actually poor? Like, or did it just feel like that in the moment? And then you kind of just move on. There's another race and learn what you can, but sometimes having a short-term memory isn't a bad thing.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for being a guest, Jessica, and thank you so much everyone for watching. Till our next lap. See ya.